Hey everyone, so let's talk about singletons. Now, singletons are probably the most basic design pattern that you can learn, and the idea is pretty straightforward. Now, imagine that you and your friends are actually playing a board game. So you have you here, and let's say that you have another friend, and you two are actually playing a board game, right? So you have a board game here, and for that to actually work, you two must actually be following a rule set, right? You normally have a rule set here. So both are actually following the same rule set, the same direction, so the board game actually works. Can you imagine what would happen if you two, right, actually followed a different rule set? That wouldn't work, right? Because everyone would be following different directions, right? Imagine that you are following a rule set and your friend is actually following a different rule set. It wouldn't work, right? So the ideal scenario here is that everyone actually follows this rule set here and everyone actually follows the same directions. Now, a singleton is similar to this scenario here. That is, you have just one instance of a class throughout the whole application. And this is useful for settings or controlling DB stuff, like database stuff, controlling the connections and such. On code, what this would actually look like is that imagine that you have a settings inside of your app, and inside of the settings you can actually change the theme of the application. That is, you can have a dark application, you have a light application, right? Pretty common nowadays. Now, so let's say that you have the class settings here, and inside of the settings you actually have the theme, right? The theme variable, which contains, let's say that it starts with dark, and we want to switch between dark and light themes. So let me create a getter for this theme variable. So we return this dot theme here, and let's say that we have another function called change theme, right? And what we actually do is set the theme and switch between a dark and light theme. So if the theme is actually equal to dark, we actually wanna set the theme to actually be light, or else we set it as dark. So we only have these two modes, right? So if I create an instance of the settings class, you see that if I console log the theme, we will have a dark theme, right? Because that's the initial value. And if I create another instance of the same class, let's say that it's settings 2, and we print out the value of the theme, you see that it's also dark because it's the initial value. Now, what happens if I change the setting, the theme value inside of the first settings instance, and console log it again? You see that what actually happens is that it starts out with dark, then it goes to light, right? Because I switched the theme, and the second instance is actually pointing out to a dark value. That is, the data is not synchronized because they are different instances, right? And for a settings which spans across all your application, you would have issues here because the data would not be synced. In one place the components would be dark, in other places it would be light. So we need to find a way to actually make sure that the settings app is synced, and we only have one instance of the settings across the whole app, right? So to do that, we can use the singleton pattern. So let me create a static instance here and a constructor. So the idea that we wanna have here is that every time that someone tries to create or instance the settings class, we want to make sure that we don't create another one. We just return one that actually exists. So let's see if settings.instance exists. What we want to do is return settings.instance, right? And if it doesn't exist, we want to set the value of settings.instance to be the current context, right? So we always return the existing context. So if I save this, you see that now the data is actually reflecting, right? So you have a dark theme initially, then you have a light theme. If I switch the data again and I console log settings again, you see that the data actually reflect in both places. So this is the idea of a singleton. This is actually a singleton. We return the instance of the class which already exists, right? And if the instance doesn't exist, we just set it to the current context, so we have the data saved there. Also, it's a static instance, so we can share the data between different instances, right? So that's the idea of having a singleton on your application. Have a good one.